Hello and welcome to Marketing Global Edition with me, Jasmine Montgomery.
And me, Piers 𝐵𝐬𝐬. So, Jasmine, as usual, this is where I go, what are we talking about today? As if I don't know.
As if you don't know. I know, we like to pull the wool over people's eyes and pretend this is totally spontaneous conversation. So, the other day when I was in Dubai, I saw something that I thought, oh my God, we have to do a podcast about that. It was, in person, in the flesh, a flying car.
Wow. Was it flying through the streets of Dubai? I mean, I must admit, when you go down the highway, 𝐻𝐻𝐶𝐶
Zayed Highway.
Which
is,
it reminds me of Blade Runner, actually. It always did, actually. But anyway, sorry. Go on.
Perfect place to see a flying car. Unfortunately, it wasn't flying down 𝐻𝐻𝐶𝐶 Zayed Highway. It was in the 𝐓𝐻𝐸𝐸 showroom on 𝐻𝐻𝐶𝐶 Zayed Highway. So it was close. Yeah, close. But it was still very exciting to see one in person.
Wow. So today we're taking a leap, literally. We're talking about flying cars. Now, eVTOLs. How do I say that, Jasmine?
I don't know. I think eVTOL.
eVTOL.
We should have worked out how to pronounce that beforehand. But it's electronic vertical lift-off something or other.
Yeah,
right?
I'll do that definition. Yeah. But anyway, it's the next frontier in urban mobility.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's brilliant. So since 1895, when H.G. Wells first envisaged, a winged personal flying machine, both kind of utopian and dystopian visions of the future have really almost always had a flying car somewhere in the urban landscape of the future, right?
And it's nuts. It's incredible. It's actually, it has arrived. You've seen it in a showroom in Dubai. I mean, it is quite...
Yeah, it has arrived. It's here. So I thought it'd be really fun to look at the branding and advertising of flying cars. Now, there's not a huge amount out there yet because it's pretty new. So we're also going to kind of imagine what we would do if we were tasked with creating an ad for flying cars. So stay tuned till the end because Piers is going to pitch a couple of ideas and so am I. And that's probably the most fun bit. But, we wanted to have a quick look at what they're doing already and then what they should do in the future as these icons of futurism land on our lawns.
So what do we say? Fasten your seatbelts. Or in this case, strap in for vertical takeoff, actually.
That's far more appropriate. Yes, thank you, 𝐵𝐬𝐬𝐬. So let's start off with, what a flying car even is today. So, unfortunately, contrary to science fiction, this is not a car that when you're driving down the road and encounter traffic, just sort of unfolds its wings and takes off from the middle of traffic, sadly.
Yeah, we're talking about, as we said, eVTOL aircraft. That means electric vertical takeoff and landing. Designed actually for really short urban hops, like between 20 and 100 miles. And what I didn't realise was they're quiet, but zero emission and increasingly tested in real cities. These are, this is real.
It's really interesting. Yeah. And there are plenty of companies out there, in case you think this is still in the minds of sci-fi creators. No, this is real. And there are companies like 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐸, Archer, Volocopter, Lilium, 𝐓𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐸, 𝐸𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐸, quite a few Chinese companies getting into this space, who are building these kind of urban air mobility networks. And China, in particular, is aggressively pushing commercial scale eVTOL ecosystems.
Remind me to talk about naming it towards later on in this conversation, Jasmine, because 𝐻𝐻𝐸 also can be read 𝐻𝐵, which is a very rude word in Scottish.
Oh dear.
Yeah, it's not great actually. Yeah, anyway.
Very funny. You know how we love a rude brand name.
Yeah,
So
𝐻𝐻𝐵. 𝐻𝐻𝐵 is another word for going to the toilet. Put it that way.
Oh, lovely. Thanks for that, 𝐵𝐬𝐬𝐬𝐬.
That's all right. Anyway, so you can actually walk into a showroom, can you, Jasmine, and buy a flying car?
Well, I obviously didn't because, I don't get paid that much. But yeah, theoretically you can. Although, like the 𝐓𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐸 that I saw, it's available for pre-orders. It's not actually for sale yet, but it will be by the end of this year. But the thing is, the catch is, you need a pilot's license to fly one, and aviation rules apply. So you can't just literally kind of buy one and fly it out of the showroom, which is a pity,
Well, Uber are bringing flying taxis in. So they're bringing them into Dubai later this year with 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐸 Aviation. Uber Air powered by 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐸𝐸. So it lets riders book all electric air taxi flights directly in the Uber app, which is going to be pretty cool, right? And each aircraft allows up to 4 passengers. So it's just like the car, but in the air. And it's flown by, as you said, a certified pilot and features panoramic windows and a quiet cabin for a smoother, scenic ride. How about that?
Yeah, and I think that really kind of paints a picture of the first sort of uptake of these vehicles, that most are not being sold to individuals, but to cities who are looking to use them for things like getting people from the airport to the city centre, for example.
Right, yeah. So they're not ready for mass consumer ownership yet. The
Yeah.
infrastructure's just not there, is it? You know, and there's regulatory frameworks which are only just forming. And just think about the safety. It's like so critical. So right now they're being sold or at least marketed to governments, city planners, airlines, and mobility operators such as Uber, not your average commuter.
Yeah, so at the moment, the kind of narrative in the marketing is it's not really about things like sort of price, horsepower, or buying a car off the lot. It's much more about kind of experience, convenience, and the future of cities and the future of mobility, you know.
Okay. So the one you saw in Dubai, it was XPeng's flying car, was it?
Yeah, and it was fascinating. You went into quite a state-of-the-art showroom. There was a robot there to kind of chat to you because they just really, this is a Chinese car brand that makes regular cars, which are quite prevalent on the streets of Dubai. But it's really cool. They really they love their flying car. And it's fascinating because it's one of the first vehicles that really blends ground and air travel. So it's a modular design. It's road-capable electric vehicle that detaches into a small eVTOL aircraft, right? And it looks so cool.
They've got to work on the naming, haven't they, really? Anyway, in
Yeah.
terms of cost, it's proper premium territory, isn't it? Reports put the price somewhere around 280,000 US dollars from up into the millions. So it
Yeah.
is
So it's
expensive stuff.
definitely, yeah, it's not mass market. It's not for you or me, but it's definitely in the reach for kind of high net worth individuals or early adopters. I mean, when you think that people buy cars in that space all the time, we'll talk about that in a minute, but at that sort of price, $250,000, I mean, you can buy a car for $30 million. So this is not the most expensive vehicle actually out there. And XPeng has started taking pre-orders, as I said. So first delivery is expected towards the end of this year, pending kind of some regulatory stuff.
Right, okay. And owning one, though, isn't just about having the money anyway. You're going to need aviation clearance. You're going to have a pilot
Yeah.
licensing that's relevant in the jurisdictions you're going to, and access to suitable airspace. So even if you've got the cash, you're probably flying in designated areas at first rather than commuting across the city. So it'd be more of a fun thing to hop about rather than actually using it properly to get from A to B, I would say.
I reckon the best use of it is going to be to get your mates to come into it in your off your helipad and like show off to your mates when they come round. Because
Yeah.
the thing is, like, I don't know if you've been on a line bike recently, but I was in Copenhagen recently on a line bike and we went from A to B and got to our destination B, but the nearest place to actually drop your line bike off was like C, miles away. It was practically back to where we got on the stupid line bikes. And I can just imagine that happening with this, except now you're in the sky and you're not allowed to land just on anybody's front lawn. So where you have to fly back to find some appropriate landing spot, at which point you run out of electric power and goodness knows what happens. Anyway, in addition to those sorts of headaches, there is also insurance, hangar space, maintenance, like all of which seriously kind of contribute to the cost. So this is very much at the moment a luxury recreational aircraft for personal ownership, right? It's not a daily commuter vehicle yet.
And that's exactly the point, right? Xpeng's flying car isn't just a product; it's a statement about the future of mobility.
Ooh.
So buying one, is being part of like the first wave, isn't it? Of individuals to
Yeah.
experience a new mode of transportation, like when people went from the carriage, I mean, from horses to the horseless carriage. We're in that
Yeah.
territory, aren't we? Really? So, but in a
Yes.
whole new world. But it's going to be super
Yes.
aspirational, and it's going to be like owning a piece of aviation history while it's still being written or flown.
Yeah, and I think that that's going to be, I mean, that's a lovely, you just sort of, in a way, defined kind of a positioning platform for it. I think when products are so advanced, the story isn't really about the specs. It's about the experience, the lifestyle, the dream of being part of something really revolutionary.
So, which brings us naturally back to branding. The challenge is huge, Jasmine. Flying cars are expensive, futuristic, and regulated. So, how do brands make people care about things like that?
Well, I think, there's a few different archetypes. They're doing it, they're coming at it in a few different ways. So in the US, Joby Aviation kind of positions itself as a premium urban air taxi service. So they are really kind of emphasizing safety, luxury, environmental responsibility. They're very much kind of Tesla meets Apple in aviation.
Then you've got Volocopter. Sounds like Velociraptor. Volocopter in Germany, which is it's actually more about urban infrastructure and winning regulators, which is quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, the narrative focuses on quiet, sustainable mobility for the city as a whole, not individual luxury, really. Different.
Yeah, very different positioning. And then in China, you've got kind of ়eheng, who's gone full sort of autonomy first, leveraging government partnerships, kind of smart city integration, and then kind of the futuristic tech spectacle. And XPeng, ℵ𝐻𝐻, treats it almost like a consumer gadget with kind of lifestyle product demos and tie-ins to its EV brand. So people are really already showing some really different approaches to branding these things.
Yeah, there's another one called Aeromobile, Aeromobile, who actually ran an ad on YouTube recently. And their ad wasn't about specs. It was about freedom, transportation, and the joy of flight. So it's positioning the brand aspirationally rather than just as a purchase-ready product.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, in this space, like it's not about selling a product today. It's about selling inevitability, sort of excitement, trust, experience. It's about selling the future, which is really exciting.
Okay, so if we break it down, flying car companies are marketing in 3 channels, right? They're marketing in B2G, B2B, and indirect B2C.
Yeah, so first B2G, governments, regulators, because certification and policy really matter most. So the airlines, the mobility operators who will actually run the services. And, you know, eventually, like the public will see kind of ride-hailing apps, demos, brand films, etc. around that space.
So for creative marketeers, that's quite a pivot, isn't it? You're not just selling to consumers.
Yeah, you're selling to city planners, you know, and so that's why a lot of the campaigns are kind of visionary rather than transactional. So, you know, Velocopter's cinematic brand films or Joby's kind of storytelling around quiet, eco-friendly flight. Even the Aeromobile ad is more kind of be the experience rather than buy now. The bigger picture story that they're telling.
It's almost like marketing space travel, actually. You're selling vision, you're building, well, you're going to try and build trust,
Yeah.
and creating desire for a world that doesn't really exist yet. So, yeah, space travel, good analogy.
Yes. So I think it would be so fun to think about how one would go about, because it doesn't really, they're not really advertising to consumers yet. That hasn't happened, right? So that's going to happen though in the next few years. And I think it would be so fun to work on that. Like I would love to do an ad for flying cars. At the moment it's about brand films, trade show demos, kind of event marketing, but how fun would it be?
There's potential for big creative moments. You know, you could imagine a Super Bowl spot. We were talking about that the other week, wasn't it? You want something huge, cinematic, emotional, aspirational, you know, beautiful.
Yeah. So, Piers, if we were designing an ad for a flying car, what might we do?
Oh, okay. So my first idea, it's got to be all around trust. So think about it. These things, you know, it's a life or death decision getting into one of these things. So branding is going to be really important, really powerful. So I wouldn't want to get into a flying car made by an unknown brand, something I haven't heard of before. I would trust Rolls-Royce or BMW. Although I'd still be worried about the tech side of it. So, you know, is the 5G latency, you know, is it enough to make sure I don't crash into someone else midair? That sort of stuff. So safety for me is the most important thing. And I think that harks back to, I talked about the horseless carriage, but when motor cars first appeared, they were frightening, right? They were loud, mechanical, unpredictable. They were competing with horses, they had names, right? They were known, trusted, living. You fed them. You know, you knew where you were, right?
We understand how they work.
Didn't scream speed. Actually, it emphasised reliability, engineering, control, and freedom from animal unpredictability. Right? And no jobbies there. So flying cars, I think, are in that phase now. They're competing with roads that we understand, commercial aircraft that we already trust, and mobility systems that feel stable. So I don't think the campaign should be about speed and like a Ferrari. It should feel more like about aerospace. So imagine the tone would be calm, measured, precise, trusted. You'd hear words like aviation grade certification, autonomous collision avoidance. That's the sort of stuff I'd want to hear, right? Instead of adrenaline, you're selling inevitability. Instead of thrill, you're selling trust. It's, it's not a rebellion against gravity. It's like AI navigation, urban density, and a conversion of that with electrical propulsion. It's it's quite scary actually, but it could be potentially safer, and it's not sexy. I think it needs to be strategically necessary.
Well, trust you to do something very grounded, right? And very kind of down to earth. But I think that the advent of flying cars allows us to take flight from being grounded. And, so here's my campaign idea, which is completely the opposite from Piers's, right? Piers's is down to earth and sensible. I think that flying cars have been the icons of futuristic visions of the world. And I love that quote from Peter Thiel, the billionaire investor, who said, when he was talking about kind of the future, he said, we wanted flying cars, instead we got 140 characters. And what he meant by that was like, people always, when they thought about the future, they thought technology was going to give them flying cars, and instead they got Twitter, right? 140 characters, X. And that was just a huge disappointment, which just goes to show, I think, the extent to which flying cars kind of nailed in our minds, like future technology, that incredible moment. Flying cars were the staple of pop culture, symbolizing future, freedom, technological optimism. If you think about the examples in pop culture, the Ford Anglia in Harry Potter, the spinner in Blade Runner, the DeLorean from Back to the Future, even the family vehicle in the Jetsons, which is my idea of a flying car, blended kind of sci-fi wonder with kind of retro futuristic charm. So for me, a campaign would be about this pivotal moment in history when this kind of much looked for innovation comes out of our dreams and into reality.
Yeah, that's quite nice actually. So another idea is to take a different slant, because the one thing about early adopters, something like this, is they're all going to be super rich, and we could think about luxury branding, status symbols and that sort of stuff. So take, for example, if we looked at luxury sports cars and how they're marketing, things like Porsche 911 turbos, Maseratis, Ferraris, brands like that, Aston Martins. They're not selling transport, right? They're selling a dream. They're selling a story of who they are. So we could apply that logic to flying cars. So it's not about beating traffic. It's not about commute times or battery range or anything like that. It would start with identity. And whereas sports car brands frame their cars as like apex predators, they're like growling and the flying car, what would that do? It'd be more like, it would frame itself as evolutionary. So it's not about speed. It would be about transcendence. I don't know. It's not. I suppose sports cars talk about 0 to 60, engine noise, track heritage. Flying car would be talking about things like vertical takeoff precision, autonomous flight stability, triple redundant safety systems, things like that. And then dramatize it in really interesting ways. They'd be just selling a lovely, lovely dream. So I like the idea of it being like that. And then instead of saying now available, it would say, that founders allocation 100 available worldwide. It would really be like a private members club, really positioned for pioneers. So I like that sort of idea. How about that?
Yeah, super interesting. Okay. I think that's a really good one for it to evolve into. I wonder if you can. I almost think maybe you can't start with that. You can't start with aspiration. You kind of have to earn it. And I think there are some barriers to entry to flying cars that maybe they have to get over before they get there. But I think that's kind of the North Star in the end. Like that's where it's going to go, surely. And it's interesting that the cars you've mentioned are in a similar price point. The sort of $250,000 kind of to a flying car. So it's in that same stable, if you like, of choices. But I wonder if before there can be kind of a Ferrari in the sky, there has to be kind of a Boeing in the driveway, in the sense that before we can make it exciting, we have to make it feel normal. And once it's normal, only then can it become desirable. So my last pitch is really around the idea of kind of a time sovereignty strategy, positioning flying cars as the ultimate sense of kind of control over time, where it's not about speed and kind of how fast it gets you there. It's about the fact that high net worth individuals, which of course are going to be the ones buying, don't optimize for money, they optimize for kind of time. So the campaign territory becomes kind of boardroom in Mayfair at 9 o'clock, 9 a.m., estate in Oxfordshire at 9:35, lunch in Paris at 12. So it's not about necessarily spectacle, but kind of precision scheduling and freedom, freeing up your time, so that it's about kind of owning your day or when minutes matter. So unlike my sci-fi fantasy kind of before coming true, it's about and unlike the safety rhetoric, which I think it probably has to do a bit in the beginning, time is quite emotionally charged. I think a lot of successful luxury brands don't sell objects, they sell relief from constraint. So I could see flying cars marketed as kind of a hedge against urban density, as sort of a weapon against calendar compression, where we're just all like overscheduled, and a kind of a competitive advantage. You can get there on time, get to the deal faster, get to the London Stock Exchange faster, get to the lunch faster, get to your mistress faster, where it shifts the category from kind of future toy to sort of executive instrument, so that it feels like there's a reason to buy it. And that sort of aligns with the way that private jets are sold, and the way helicopter charters are rationalized, and kind of fractional aviation, where you get part-time private jet. Although people take Instagram selfies of themselves getting off their private plane and looking fabulous, they rationalize it to their CFOs and their accountants and their wives and or husbands, as kind of, and their business partners as sort of, terribly important and need to manage my time. So I wonder if that reframes flying cars as kind of a productivity infrastructure for elites, which I think is commercially powerful, maybe as an idea. That's my last offer to the flying car brands.
It really annoys me. I'm going to have to say this, but that was the better idea.
Oh, hurrah!
Yeah, that was really good. I like that actually. Yeah, but it really grates me to say that. But anyway, there you go.
I'm so sorry.
So yeah, you can win today. I did personally actually really love that one. So
okay, great.
So that concludes flying cars, I suppose. Other than the fact you're dying to brand one, obviously.
I'm dying to own one. I mean, geez, are you? I think it's so exciting that they're here. They're not really here for mass ownership yet, but they will be soon. I'd love to be able to buy one day when I win the lottery. Really exciting to see how they go to market.
Yeah. And there is a lesson there for every marketeer. You do have to sell the vision, sell trust, sell the experience before the product even exists sometimes. Right?
And who knows, maybe one day we will all be flying to work. Until then, we'll keep watching, thinking and imagining how the brands make it feel inevitable. I mean, just as a final note, would you be happy to go up in a flying car?
I mean, seriously, if it was built by Rolls-Royce with some serious Vodafone tech in it or something like that, maybe.
I will try.
I'm not sure I would.
I will try any of them. Anybody out there who wants me to come and try their flying car, I'm up for it. I don't care who you are. I'll go anywhere. I'll get in anyone. I'm too excited.
Good. Well done. All right, that's it today. Thanks very much from Marketing Global Edition. It's bye from me.
Great,
Piers.
and bye from me. See you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Marketing Global Edition is sponsored by 𝐻𝐸𝐸, the ad generator for small businesses that serves you effective and affordable ads in seconds. And by 7 Brands, the international advertising and branding agency that has worked with clients around the world from Coca-Cola to Facebook.